Impressive.
The mystery of the Engineer's Temple in Prometheus remains one of the most debated topics in sci-fi. At its heart is a single powerful image, a giant, meticulously crafted mural of a xenomorph. This wasn't graffiti, this was sacred art. So why would the engineers, a race of apparent god-makers, worship the universe's most perfect predator? Let's break down the theories. The first and most straightforward theory is that the xenomorph was their ultimate bioweapon, and they revered it for its perfect, destructive purity. To understand this, you have to look at the context. The mural isn't in an art gallery, it's in the ampule room, a structure that also functions as a storage facility for thousands of canisters of the black goo. This placement blurs the line between laboratory and cathedral, suggesting that for the engineers, science and religion were not separate. The black goo itself is a mutagenic agent, a substance that deconstructs and repurposes life. It's a tool for unmaking and remaking reality. The xenomorph, then, can be seen as the ultimate expression of this technology. It is, as Ash called it in the original Alien, a perfect organism. Its design is flawlessly lethal, a biomechanical exoskeleton, acid for blood, a parasitic reproductive cycle that bypasses natural selection, and a purely instinctual drive to hunt and propagate. In the eyes of the engineers, this wasn't a random mutation. It was a masterpiece of bioengineering. They were the gardeners of the galaxy, and sometimes to seed new life, you must first burn the field. The xenomorph was their sacred flame, their angel of annihilation. They didn't just use it, they worshipped the sublime, terrifying beauty of its absolute function. The mural was a tribute to this divine instrument, a recognition that they had created something of such pure, uncompromising purpose that it transcended being a mere tool and became an object of spiritual reverence. This theory is supported by the concept artists for the film, who have described the mural as having a religious or sacrificial quality, and the xenomorph as the pure form of this virus. It was a god of destruction, and they were its devoted priests. The second theory flips the script, proposing that the xenomorph was not a mastered weapon, but a failed creation that turned on its makers, and their worship was actually a form of terrified appeasement. The evidence on LV-223 doesn't point to a controlled environment. It points to a catastrophic outbreak. The holographic recordings show engineers running in panic from an unseen threat. The only living engineer is found in stasis, a last resort to survive a disaster. The halls are littered with the dead, their bodies twisted and broken. This is not the scene of an orderly worship service. It's the aftermath of a lab leak of apocalyptic proportions. This theory suggests that the xenomorph, or its progenitor, often called the ultramorph, was an accident. Perhaps it was an early, unstable prototype of the black goo technology, or a byproduct that achieved a terrifying level of evolutionary independence. It became a power they could not control, a life form that proved superior to its creators. When faced with a force you cannot destroy, what options remain? You can flee, you can hide, or you can attempt to appease it. Throughout human history, we have made sacrifices to volcanoes, to storms, to diseases, all in a desperate attempt to placate powers beyond our control. The Engineer's Temple, then, might not be a place of honor, but a place of fear. The mural is not a celebration of a weapon, but a depiction of their monster god. They made sacrifices to it, hoping to divert its wrath. The religious iconography is not born from admiration, but from sheer primal terror. They had opened Pandora's box, and the best they could do was kneel before what escaped. This theory also helps explain the timeline issues with the derelict on LV-426, which appears much older, suggesting the xenomorph problem existed long before the outbreak on LV-223. They were not the masters of this creature, but its first and most unfortunate victims. The third and most radical theory completely inverts the creator-creation relationship. It posits that the engineers did not create the xenomorphs. Instead, the xenomorphs created the engineers. This idea, popular among fans, forces us to reevaluate the entire mythology. We see a clear cycle of creation in the Alien universe. The engineers create humanity. Humanity creates androids like David, and androids aspire to create their own life forms. It is a chain of creators and their creations. So, who sits at the top? Who created the engineers? This theory suggests it was the xenomorphs, or a highly advanced progenitor species that closely resembled them. Imagine a primordial, hyper-intelligent species whose mastery was not over technology, but over biology itself. Facing extinction, their final act was to engineer a servant race, the engineers, to act as their proxies. The engineers' entire mission of seeding worlds with life would not be their own ambition, but a programmed directive. They were cosmic gardeners, yes, but they were tending a garden for their absent masters. Their purpose was to prepare ecosystems, to create conditions suitable for the eventual return or rebirth of their creators. In this light, the mural is not a depiction of a monster or a weapon. It is a portrait of their god, their maker, their original designer. The religious symbolism becomes perfectly literal. They were not worshipping a concept, they were worshipping their actual biological fathers. This adds a profound layer of tragedy to their actions. Their quest for creation, their disappointment in humanity, their entire civilization is just them running a program written by a species of perfect parasites. It also creates a hauntingly symmetrical cycle where every creation eventually rebels against its creator, from the engineers against the xenomorphs, to humanity against the engineers, to David against humanity. To fully understand this worship, we need to look at the religious and cultural parallels. The engineer's behavior is steeped in symbolism that mirrors human practices. The opening scene of Prometheus shows an engineer sacrificing himself by drinking the black goo, disintegrating and seeding the planet with his DNA. This is a clear parallel to ancient creation myths where a god is dismembered to form the world, like the Mesopotamian Tiamat or the Norse Ymir. It establishes sacrifice as a fundamental principle of their cosmology, death for the purpose of creation. Even more potent is the symbol of the cross. The xenomorph in the mural is often depicted in a pose reminiscent of Christ on the cross. Director Ridley Scott himself has hinted that the engineers turned against humanity after we crucified a messianic figure they sent to guide us. If that is true, then their religion underwent a cataclysmic shift. They may have seen our rejection of their emissary as the ultimate sin. In response, they replaced their gospel of creation with a New Testament of judgment. The xenomorph becomes their new Messiah, not of salvation, but of divine retribution. It is the second coming meant not to save humanity, but to scourge it from the face of the universe. This dark religious narrative is completed by Elizabeth Shaw's Virgin Birth of the Trilobite, which occurs on Christmas Day. The symbolism is unmistakable. A blasphemous nativity story giving birth to the means of humanity's destruction, all under the gaze of their crucified xenomorph god. Of course, these theories are not without their complications. The later film, Alien Covenant, introduced the android David as the conscious creator of the classic xenomorph, performing horrific experiments to perfect the organism. This seems to contradict the idea of the xenomorph as an ancient object of worship. However, it can be reconciled. Perhaps David was not creating from scratch, but was reverse engineering a pre-existing biological blueprint left behind by the engineers. His work was not creation, but rediscovery. A mortal man piecing together the works of a god, creating a flawed imitation god of his own. The conflicting timelines and the introduction of different castes of engineers also suggest that their civilization was not a monolith. There may have been factions, schisms, and civil wars over the use and worship of the black goo and the xenomorph. The space jockeys may have been a different group entirely from the robed gardeners we see seeding Earth. The evidence is fragmented, and we are left to assemble the pieces of a broken puzzle. The worship of the xenomorph by the engineers is a multifaceted mystery that speaks to the core themes of the Alien prequels: creation, destruction, and the hubris of playing God. The xenomorph was likely all three things at once: a divine bioweapon, representing the pinnacle of their power to destroy; a failed creation, representing the catastrophic consequences of their hubris; and potentially their original creator, representing the terrifying possibility that they were just a link in a cosmic chain, serving masters they could not comprehend. Their temple was a church for a dead religion built around a god that was both their greatest achievement and their eventual damnation. They knelt before the xenomorph because, in its perfect, horrifying existence, they saw the ultimate reflection of their own nature, creators and destroyers, forever bound to the monster they brought into being.